Dan, please.
No! And nothing will change my mind.
Not even these pictures I took in the photo booth in the lobby.
My God!
Remember when the strangest courtroom in television history somehow made a parade of oddballs and deeply confused defendants into one of the funniest sitcoms of the decade? Premiering on NBC in 1984, Night Court followed the overnight shift of a Manhattan criminal court run by a relentlessly optimistic Judge Harry Stone, played by Harry Anderson. Alongside him, the shamelessly self-serving prosecutor Dan Fielding, played by John Larroquette, the towering, gentle bailiff Bull Shannon, played by Richard Moll, and after a revolving door of public defenders, Markie Post's Christine Sullivan finally arrived to provide the courtroom's one thin layer of sanity. The show ran 9 seasons, and what happened behind the scenes was somehow even stranger than what aired. And today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Night Court that you probably never knew. And stick around for number 1, because Night Court's most notorious seat came with a heartbreaking history. And the woman who finally made it legendary didn't even walk through those courtroom doors until season 4. But before we jump in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. It helps YouTube show this to more retro TV fans just like you. All right, all rise. Let's get into it. Number 15, Dan Fielding was almost the most boring character on the show. Now, Dan Fielding, the most shamelessly self-serving, aggressively inappropriate character in Night Court history, was originally written as like a stiff, conservative snob.
No. That was Dan Fielding. Excuse me.
Let that sink in for a moment. Now, the plan was pretty straightforward. Fielding would be the buttoned-up, humorless counterweight to Judge Harry Stone's chaos. Then John Larroquette walked into rehearsal, and the whole blueprint quietly caught fire. Now, Larroquette had a mischievous energy and a natural gift for playing morally flexible characters without losing the audience. Producers recognized it immediately, and creator Reinhold Weege made the call. The character was getting a full transplant. The stiff snob idea, well, that got gutted and rebuilt into a fast-talking, shamelessly womanizing narcissist who treated the courtroom less like a place of justice and more like a singles bar with worse lighting.
Dan's apartment.
Dan's apartment.
Yes, Dan's apartment.
The results became one of the most memorable sitcom characters of the 1980s, stealing scenes with rapid-fire insults and an ego roughly the size of the island that he worked on. Weege also snuck in a quiet inside joke. Dan's full name was eventually revealed to be Reinhold Daniel Fielding Elmore. That's right, the show's creator named his most outrageous, boundary-obliterating character after himself. Number 14, Bull Shannon's bald head came from a movie nobody watched. Bull Shannon's bald head was one of the most recognizable looks in 80s sitcom history. It was also completely unplanned.
Mr.
Prosecutor, will you fill me in on this circus?
Richard Moll shaved his head for a 1983 sci-fi film called Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin, where he played a one-eyed villain named Hurok, I guess. The role required heavy prosthetics, the prosthetics required a shaved head, and Moll, well, he obliged. While still in production on the film, he auditioned for a brand new NBC sitcom, walking in with absolutely zero hair and apparently zero concerns about it. The Night Court casting team saw a 6'8" man with a completely bald head walk through the door and made a snap decision. Keep it exactly like that.
No, not a cow. Bull.
Bull Shannon looked like someone who had wandered in from a different dimension entirely and was perfectly fine with that. Moll assumed that they'd eventually ask him to grow it back, but instead, he spent 9 seasons with a razor, maintaining that look under studio lights that had no mercy for stubble. The throwaway villain role in a movie that almost nobody saw accidentally handed one of the 80s most beloved sitcom characters his entire visual identity. Number 13, the most recognizable laugh in the audience was never a stranger. If you ever watched Night Court and noticed one laugh cutting through the studio audience like a foghorn at a library, you weren't losing your mind. That laugh belonged to Chuck Weege, father of show creator Reinhold Weege, and the man was apparently having the time of his life at every single taping. Chuck and Reinhold's mother Georgia became fixtures in the audience, showing up so consistently that the cast and crew could spot them before the cameras even rolled. Once Chuck's laugh hit, it was unmistakable. loud, wheezy, and completely unbothered by the concept of blending in. Most producers would have quietly buried it in the edit, but Reinhold did the opposite. Chuck's booming cackle stayed in. It became part of the show's texture and eventually made it into the production logo. The Starry Night Productions vanity card that closes every episode in the first 6 seasons, that laugh punctuating the end of the show, is Chuck immortalized in the final seconds of every night court that Weege produced. It was Weege's way of sneaking his father into the show permanently, which is either the sweetest thing a son ever did or the most elaborate way that anyone ever has said, "Dad, this one's for you," in television history. Number 12, the weirdest courtroom on TV was ripped from real life. Night Court's Parade of Misfits was basically a documentary. Creator Reinhold Weege based the entire series on real night court sessions in New York City.
I am a judge. This is my bench. This is my courtroom. This is my gavel. Now, when you come into the courtroom and you see Mr. Judge at Mr. Bench,
Where the justice system runs a late shift, processing minor offenses well into the evening. The real Manhattan Criminal Court held sessions from 5 p.m. until 1 a.m., churning through 70 to 90 cases a night in what can only be described as a human conveyor belt of bad decisions. But Weege didn't just hear stories about what walked through those doors after dark. He went and saw it himself, sitting on the bench alongside real New York City night court judges. And the defendants weren't even the most interesting part. It was the judges. In his own words, Weege said that he was just moved by the craziness of New York Manhattan night court. There were news reports at the time about real judges with serious emotional problems. Brilliant, but unconventional in ways that would never survive a standard 9-to-5 courtroom.
I can't be held accountable. An ethereal force violently expelled the essence from my body.
you tried the steak fajitas, huh?
Weege's reaction was essentially, well, what if one of those judges slipped through the system? Well, that question eventually became Judge Harry Stone, young, magic-obsessed, and operating on a frequency slightly removed from the rest of the legal system. The real Manhattan night courts obviously didn't feature inflatable dinosaurs or Dan Fielding hitting on the entire gallery, but, well, the raw material was already there, running every night on Center Street, completely free of charge. Number 11, NBC greenlit a show and spent 2 years being wrong about it. When NBC executives sat down to watch the night court pilot, well, the room apparently went very quiet in all the wrong ways.
Could I do this?
The show that they were looking at didn't resemble anything else on their schedule. Bizarre defendants shuffling through a late-night courtroom, surreal jokes landing in places where straightforward punchlines should have been. Well, for network decision-makers accustomed to more predictable sitcom territory, the vibe landed somewhere between confused and deeply uncertain. The network had particular skepticism about Harry Anderson himself. An actual magician with 0 traditional acting credits being handed the lead role of a network sitcom? That's not exactly a conventional bet. The skepticism showed up everywhere. Multiple cast changes in the first season, a revolving door at the public defender's desk, a general sense backstage that nobody was entirely sure that the whole thing would hold together. But NBC moved forward anyway, and the first season made their anxiety look justified. Night Court finished 47th in the Nielsen ratings.
Well, frankly, I just don't know.
To put that in perspective, 47th means the accounting department starts doing the grim math while the writers are still cashing checks. But the smartest move that the network made all year was parking Night Court on Thursday nights, slotted alongside Cheers and The Cosby Show. Every single thing that made executives nervous in that screening room, the surreal humor, chaotic energy, the judge with a card trick, that all turned out to be exactly what audiences kept coming back for. A show that nearly flatlined in its first season became one of NBC's most dependable Thursday night hits. Number 10, Harry Anderson knew how to run a con before he ran a courtroom. Now, while many actors prepare for a role by researching it, Harry Anderson prepared for Judge Harry Stone by getting punched in the face on a San Francisco street corner. Yeah, you heard that right.
You know, Dan, that's a funny story. It was the mayor's last day in office, and it was a Sunday.
Long before Night Court, Anderson was running shell games on the streets of Chicago, San Francisco, New Orleans, and New York. He picked up these skills as a kid hanging around the Ambassador Hotel, where the old guys would play cards and the hustlers would work the room. Anderson paid close attention. Then, one day in San Francisco, someone decided that they didn't enjoy losing their money quite as much as Anderson enjoyed taking it. The confrontation ended with Anderson's jaw broken and a fairly clear message that street cons had a lousy benefits package. He took the skills he had, the shell game, cheating at cards, picking locks, etc., and turned them into a legitimate act. He made less money initially, but he did keep his jaw intact at least, which he had come to appreciate. Now, the act was convincing enough to land him the recurring role of Harry the Hat on Cheers.
You need change? Maybe I can help you, huh?
Great. Hold it.
Which introduced him to a national audience and eventually put him in front of the night court producers. Then came the kicker. Anderson's only actual arrest happened after he'd already gone legitimate. While running the shell game as a demonstration of how the con worked, police assumed that he was running the real thing and hauled him in anyway. He spent a couple of nights in jail sorting it out. Turns out the man who had spent 9 seasons handing down justice already had done research from both sides of the bench. Number 9, a Charlie's Angels star was fired during rehearsals. Now, after season 1, producers decided that the courtroom needed a new public defender, someone grounded and capable of being that calm eye. And their solution was Shelley Hack, fresh off her run on Charlie's Angels.
Until one night on the way to a school dance, her face went through a windshield. It was 2 years of plastic surgery and therapy before she got her face back.
Hack was cast as Christine Sullivan heading into season 2, with the character specifically redesigned as the straight man anchor to Harry's chaos. The straight man dynamic that looked great in the pitch room, it quietly was suffocating the energy out of every scene it touched. The chemistry between the new Christine and the rest of the courtroom, it wasn't clicking, and both sides could feel it almost immediately. In Hack's own words, what happened was the role was changed. Instead of being a funny lady, as she was in the reading, they had changed her into a straight woman. It wasn't working. The concept just didn't work, and that's what I told them. I mean, what's the point if it's not working? Hack and producer Reinhold Weege made the mutual decision to part ways. The episode that she had already filmed, Daddy for the Defense, was reshot entirely with Markie Post before it ever aired.
Your Honor, I just want to say that something I believe in is far more important than my comfort, and no matter what others may do.
She remains one of the more unusual entries in the show's history, a recognizable TV star who joined the cast, filmed an episode, and was gone before a single frame of her performance ever reached a broadcast. Number 8, 4 public defenders, 3 seasons, and 1 casting nightmare. Hack was just one stop on a casting carousel that had been spinning since the pilot, and the ride started long before she arrived. The pilot handed the role to Gail Strickland, who played public defender Sheila Gardner in exactly just 1 episode before disappearing entirely.
A new man has been appointed to the bench, and all you hope for is someone who can play chess.
Paula Kelly stepped in for season 1 as Liz Williams. She did well enough to earn an Emmy nomination, but then also vanished when producers decided to retool that whole courtroom dynamic. Then came singer and actress Ellen Foley in season 2. But producers felt the romantic tension with Judge Harry Stone never quite landed the way that they had hoped.
Your Honor, if I may, it seems to me my client is having a little problem with reality. Don't!
Mr. Slayball.
So here's the thing. Creator Reinhold Weege had known who he wanted the whole time. His first choice was Markie Post. Full stop. The problem was that Post was locked into a contract with the ABC action series The Fall Guy, and NBC had no choice but to sit on their hands and wait. Post made a guest appearance during season 2 while her contract situation sorted itself out, then finally joined the cast full-time in season 3 as Christine Sullivan, the version that audiences actually remember.
I'm afraid not, Your Honor. My client refuses to waive the reading of the information.
You what? We never do that.
4 public defenders, 3 seasons, and 1 contract dispute to get there. It was worth the wait, as it turned out. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button. It tells YouTube that there are people out there who still care that a sitcom judge performed real magic tricks in a Manhattan courthouse. And subscribe if you haven't already, and also, while you're there, drop a comment with your favorite night court character. All right, now that little deliberation's over, let's examine some more evidence. Let's get back to the countdown. Number 7, Weege's friends didn't get a thank you card, they got a rap sheet. Most TV creators thank their friends in the acknowledgments. Reinhold Weege put him in a criminal database. In the season 1 DVD commentary, Weege disclosed it himself. He had named the show's recurring parade of prostitutes and pimps after people he'd actually known in real life. Not loosely inspired by, not a subtle nod, their names on screen attached to some of the most gloriously disreputable defendants ever to shuffle through a fictional Manhattan courtroom. Now, in Weege's mind, it was his way of saying hello to friends and acquaintances that he held dear. His friends, they might have mixed feelings about the medium, though, that he chose. What is on record is that it happened repeatedly across the show's run, which means at some point it stopped being an accident and then became policy. An affectionate policy, apparently, and a deeply questionable one, but affectionate. It's worth noting that Weege had already named his most outrageous character, Dan Fielding, after himself. So apparently nobody in that writer's room was safe, friend or creator alike. If you knew Reinhold Weege, there was a decent chance that you were eventually going to end up in front of Judge Harry Stone at 2 in the morning with some explaining to do. Number 6, the show's theme song ended up on a hip-hop chart. The Night Court theme wasn't subtle. That deep bass line, the smooth jazz groove. Composer Jack Elliott built something that lodged itself permanently in the back of your brain, whether you asked it to or not. In 1998, 6 years after the show aired its final episode, rapper Cameron released Horse and Carriage off his debut album, Confessions of Fire. The original version, featuring Mace, climbed to number 41 on the Billboard Hot 100 and cracked the top 10 on both the R&B and rap charts. Then came the remix, and that's where Night Court showed up. Producer Daryl, or Digga Branch, lifted that unmistakable bass line straight out of its late-night courtroom and dropped it into a track featuring one of the more stacked late 90s lineups assembled for a single remix. Big Pun, Wyclef Jean, Charlie Baltimore, and Silk the Shocker, all riding a groove that originated in an NBC sitcom about a magic-obsessed judge and his deeply chaotic staff. You don't know what we going through. You don't know the things that can be showing you. It fits so naturally that it almost felt like the beat had been waiting for the right producer just to find it. A theme song written for a fictional Manhattan courtroom that only operated after dark ended up soundtracking one of 1998's more memorable hip-hop moments. Jack Elliott almost certainly didn't see that coming when he wrote it, and neither did anyone else. Number 5, a joke accidentally revived Mel Tormé's career. Judge Harry Stone had a lot of quirks: the magic tricks, the chaos tolerance, the complete comfort presiding over a courtroom that functioned like a carnival midway with a gavel, but nothing consumed him quite like Mel Tormé.
Excuse me, I need somebody. I got these 2 lunatics chasing me. Hello? Hello?
Now, if you need a quick refresher, Mel Tormé was one of the most celebrated jazz vocalists of the 20th century. He was nicknamed the Velvet Fog for a voice so smooth it could make a parking ticket sound like poetry. He co-wrote the Christmas song, yes, that one, and spent decades as a fixture in the jazz world long before Night Court got involved. Harry talked about the Velvet Fog the way that other people talk about breathing, constantly, enthusiastically, and with zero awareness that anyone around him might be tired of hearing it. What made it even better was something that Weege didn't plan. Harry Anderson was a genuine card-carrying Mel Tormé fan in real life. Weege had written the obsession into the character before he even knew that. Now, when he found out, he called it a complete coincidence. It was also perfect. The two eventually became actual friends, which meant that every courtroom rant about jazz's smoothest voice was less performance and more barely contained personal truth. And somewhere in all that sitcom devotion, something strange happened. Gen X viewers who had never once considered listening to a jazz singer started wondering, who is this Velvet Fog guy? Well, curiosity turned into record sales, and record sales turned into concert tickets. Concert tickets turned into audiences that were suddenly, inexplicably, younger than they'd been in decades. Tormé noticed it himself. He later said that his concert audiences kept getting younger, and he credited Night Court directly for that resurgence. The show eventually took the whole thing to its logical conclusion and just put Tormé on camera. He made multiple appearances playing himself. Occasionally shattering Harry's carefully constructed idol fantasy by being magnificently and hilariously human. Number 4, John Larroquette won 4 Emmys and then told the Academy, "I'm done." Most actors spend their entire careers chasing Emmy gold, but John Larroquette won 4 in a row and then told the Academy to keep the change. As Dan Fielding, Night Court's self-serving prosecutor, Larroquette was operating at a level that the Television Academy just couldn't simply ignore.
On the other hand, I'm not exactly a nobody either. I mean, I have 2 Emmys.
Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series in 1985, 86, then 87, and then 1988. 4 consecutive wins, same category, same show. Same guy smoothing his tie on the way to the podium. Now, after that fourth trophy, Larroquette called the Academy and asked them to stop nominating him. In an industry where people tattoo award nominations on their personality, that's practically a criminal act. The reasoning was part practical and part self-preservation. Dan Fielding had made such a scorched earth impression on audiences that Larroquette was genuinely worried that the role would follow him off the lot and into his mailbox. He wanted to prove that he could play something, anything, other than TV's most lovably reprehensible lawyer. A fifth Emmy for professional sleaziness, that's not exactly going to broaden his horizons. So he voluntarily walked away from the podium, which in Hollywood is roughly as common as a night court defendant showing up in an actual suit. The gamble paid off. Nearly a decade later, Larroquette won another Emmy in 1998, this time for playing a psychopathic killer on the legal drama The Practice. A completely different flavor of terrifying, but the Academy clearly still had a type. Number 3, the finale managed to unfinale itself 2 weeks later. Night Court ran 9 seasons and 193 episodes. It earned its curtain call. Warner Brothers decided syndication was more important than sentiment and then deliberately avoided a definitive finale. The result was exactly as unsatisfying as it sounds. Now, behind the scenes, the confusion started a season early. The writers believed that season 8 was the end. They built out proper closure arcs, and they spent months threading storylines toward a real goodbye. Then, NBC renewed the show for one more year, which forced the writers to quietly dismantle everything that they'd constructed and pretend that just none of it had happened. So by the time the actual final episode aired in May of 1992, the cast only found out that the series was ending while they were actively filming it. Markie Post said that they read it in the paper. Christine Sullivan got elected to Congress. Dan Fielding resigned to follow her to Washington. Harry, meanwhile, rejected a prestigious job offer and stayed right where he was, which meant that the relationship between him and Christine landed nowhere and was left just kind of hanging in the air with nowhere to go. 18 days later, NBC broadcast a leftover episode where everyone was back at their regular courtroom jobs as if the finale just never aired. For viewers watching in real time, the ending essentially unmade itself on live television. Markie Post and John Larroquette both went on record saying that the show went out with a whimper, and they weren't wrong. Larroquette put it plainly. Warner Bros. Wouldn't allow them to definitively end the show, and he was pretty angry about it. The attempted fix came 16 years later, courtesy of 30 Rock. A 2008 episode brought Harry Anderson, Markie Post, and Charles Robinson all back to film a fake Lost finale. The plan was to finally give Harry and Christine their wedding, but what actually happened was the actors fell back into 15 years worth of unresolved tensions the moment the cameras rolled. It was funnier than the real ending, and at this point, that's probably the best that anyone could have hoped for. Number 2, Dan Fielding came back, just not in the way that anyone expected. Now, when NBC announced the Night Court revival in 2023, the question on every longtime fan's mind was the same one. Would any of the originals actually come back? John Larroquette answered that question by being the only original main cast member to return as a full-time series regular, and he showed up for all 3 seasons.
We've had this discussion before. Nobody wants to come here and do pranks. Being here is the prank.
Making Dan Fielding the connective tissue between the classic series and everything that came after it. The twist that made it genuinely interesting was what Dan was doing this time around. The man who spent 9 seasons as Night Court smug prosecutor came back as a public defender, recruited by the new judge, Abby Stone, played by Melissa Rao. Abby, as it turned out, was Judge Harry Stone's daughter, which meant that Dan was now answering to the kid of the man he'd spent a decade driving absolutely crazy. The universe has a sense of humor. The revival also handed Dan something that the original series never really bothered with: depth. The shameless womanizer returned as a widower, quieter around the edges, and that reckless energy of his younger years was traded in for something more worn in.
Sarcastic in C.
Boom, boom, boom. Thank you, Wyatt, for breathing. Thanks for being alive.
The sarcasm remained fully intact, obviously. Some things can't erode. But a handful of familiar faces from the original series did make their way back through the doors for some guest appearances. NBC canceled the revival, though, in 2025 after 3 seasons. Number 1, 3 bailiffs, 2 funerals, and 1 legend. Selma Diamond played bailiff Selma Hacker during the first 2 seasons. A raspy-voiced, deadpan veteran comedian whose dry delivery could flatten a punchline from across the room.
Male. Female.
Audiences loved her immediately. Then, shortly after season 2 wrapped, Diamond died of lung cancer at 64. The cast was blindsided. The audience was gutted. Producers brought in Florence Hallop to fill the bailiff chair as Florence Flo Kleiner, carrying the same feisty energy into the courtroom. But one season later, Hallop also died of lung cancer at 63. 2 bailiffs, 2 seasons, the same illness. The cast and crew started calling it the Bailiff Curse. To the series' credit, though, Night Court didn't just quietly recast and move on. The show did acknowledge both deaths on screen, addressing Selma's passing in the season 3 premiere, with Bull Shannon grieving her loss in a way that was pretty raw and completely unlike anything else airing on NBC that season. When Florence Hallop died the following year, the season 4 premiere addressed that too, with Harry Stone admitting on screen that he was more broken up about losing both bailiffs than he was about losing his own mother. Dark, honest, and handled with more care than most shows would have bothered with. And then came Marsha Warfield. Starting in season 4, Warfield stepped into the bailiff's chair as Roz Russell and did something that nobody could have predicted after 2 years of heartbreak. She made the role completely and undeniably her own.
So, tell me about yourself.
I'm 32. I'm a fun-loving tourist whose hobbies include full-contact karate, Brahma bull riding, and small-caliber weapons.
Where the previous bailiffs had leaned into warm and feisty, Warfield went another direction entirely. Roz was sharp, deadpan, and had approximately zero tolerance for the nonsense surrounding her, which made her the perfect foil for a courtroom drowning in it. Now, Warfield held the chair for the final 6 seasons, and Roz Russell eventually became one of the most beloved characters the show ever produced.
Oh, hell. Damn fool made me cry.
The withering one-liners, the ability to silence an entire courtroom with one single look, the standout delivery, it all landed hard. She also returned decades later for the 2023 revival, reprising Roz for guest appearances that reminded a new generation exactly why that character had stuck around in the first place. Night Court's most cursed seat produced some of the show's most painful off-screen moments, but it also produced one of the greatest characters. Sometimes it's just how it works. And there you have it, 15 weird and wild facts about Night Court. Before we adjourn, which one surprised you the most? Well, drop your closing arguments in the comments and share this with a friend who can still hear that bass line in their sleep. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Hopefully, we'll see you guys on the right side of the bench. Until then, this is Remember When.